right, welcome back. So what we're going to do is we're going to integrate with Firebase. So to integrate with Firebase, we've kind of got the same setup rules that we used before. So we have to do this npm install Angular Fire 2 and Firebase save. So I'm going to go ahead and run that command. And you can see that it kind of does its thing. If you want to look at the diff that it does for you, it's going to make a change to your package.json where it adds Angular Fire 2 and Firebase. So those things were pretty easy. Next, we've got to have a place to put it. For you, I recommend you just cannibalize your old movie quotes. I think that'll just be easier. For me, I'm going to make Ionic Movie Quotes because I've got a bunch of projects. I don't mind burning another one. If you are using your old movie quotes, you've probably already got some data in here, and you've probably already got your rules set up to true. If you created a new one like I did here, you'll have to say true and true. And the reason you have to do that is because there's no authentication in movie quotes. And if you have some data, great, just leave the data. If you don't have any data, go ahead and add a little bit. So just go ahead and add a fake key here with a movie. We'll go ahead and do the Lego movie and a quote. And of course the quote is, "Everything is awesome." I haven't actually seen that movie in a long time, but that's Dr. Valtow. He's with me. He's the one who always used that quote. So there we've got a little bit of data because we're going to go ahead and do read, right? So we're going to go ahead and read this in. The other thing we need to do is we need to connect it. So go ahead and come and grab your configuration information. So copy your configuration information out. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow the steps in here. The one difference being the steps here say to use your environments. Ionic doesn't use the environments thing, so we just have to plop that in to the app module, right? So just like right here, we'll just say export const Firebase config, and it's just going to be equal to an object. As mentioned in the last video, export really doesn't do anything. It was just mentioned as best practice somewhere, so I say the word export as well, Firebase config. And then we come down in here and we say, hey, what do they want me to do? Well, we're going to need the Angular Fire module. We don't need environments because we just stuck it right in here. And then we're going to need this Angular Fire module initialize app. So that'll be a good thing for us to do right about here. And instead of being in the environments and being called Firebase, it's just in this file, and it's just called Firebase config right there. Cool, so that is pretty easy. The next thing we want to do is we want to, don't add a custom name, we want to decide whether we want to add authentication, storage, messaging, things like that. Well, we just want the database. There's no sign in, so we're just going to grab the database. Just to mention something about sign-in. Sign-in is interesting. So sign-in works just like it did before for the web, and that's all fine. For a progressive web app, works just like it did before. For a web app that you're opening up in the two browsers, that's fine. The difference with authentication is that if you use a native app, you have different rules you have to follow with authentication. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to warn you that authentication is a little bit non-trivial if you're wanting to generate iOS and Android apps, and you'll have to look into it more if that's something you're wanting to do for your project. All right, here I just want the database module. Sorry about the little tangent there. So I'll grab the database module with a giant comment at the end. And so now I've done the Angular Firebase setup. So that was easy. In order to actually get it to do something, I'm going to need to use dependency injection somewhere though. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in my list and I'm going to do dependency injection to add Angular Fire at this location. So I'm just going to go ahead and say private db Angular Fire database. And that should auto import just fine. And then I've got to decide what I want to do. Well, what I really want to do is I want to read things in, and then I want to, display them on the screen. And we could start in either area. We could start in the HTML or we could start in the TypeScript. But since we're in the TypeScript, let's just go ahead and plug some more things in here. So we're going to have to make something called the movie quote stream. And you can make it public, or you can just leave it blank. The default is public, right? And what we want to make here is a Firebase list observable. And he's going to fire off movie quote objects. And there's a couple things that are wrong here. This one needs an import, that's easy. And then movie quote, well, we need to define a movie quote object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an interface, but since I've got 2 pages, I'm going to make it in a separate file. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click in here. I'm going to make a new folder called models. And then inside my models, I'm going to make a new file called movie-quotes.ts, or actually movie quote singular .ts. And you can add the word model in there or the word interface, doesn't matter. But ultimately, I'm going to export an interface for a movie quote. And it's going to have a quote, which is a string. And it's going to have a movie, which is a string. And since it might come from Firebase, it could potentially have a $key. So I'm going to say $key ? Because if it came from Firebase, it will have a $key, but if it's one that I made and I haven't yet pushed it up, it won't have one. So I'm going to say $key ? So those things are all easy peasy. Now I should be able to import this. So this is going to be a stream that fires up, it's going to fire up arrays of movie quotes. Sorry about that. And then I can either in my constructor or within ng on init, I can set up the stream. To be honest, I think usually I'd put it in ng on init, but ng on init doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to put it right here in the constructor. So my movie quote stream is equal to this.db.list. And then I'm going to need to put it on my movie quote path. If I was being more thorough, I would make a constant out of this, but here I'm just going to cheat. I'm just going to say it's on the quotes path, and that's going to be that. And then you can optionally, if you want, you don't have to do this, you can put a slash at the start of it just to kind of show, hey, this is coming from the root. All right, so at this point, I've got a stream. It's actually connecting to my database. My database has data in it. So for me, I've got the one quote. Maybe you'll have a lot of quotes. So all I need to do now is I need to display it over in the HTML. So right here where it says this will be a list of quotes, this is where I've got to do something with my movie quote stream. I can also clean this file up a little bit. So what we've done in the past is we've made, unordered list or divs or things like that. But here we're going to look for an Ionic component to help us out. So I've got my link here to Ionic components. And what I'm going to look for with Ionic components is how can I make kind of like a table. So there's a thing called a grid here. There's a thing called list here. And then there's nothing called table. So list is what we want. And you can see here's an example of what a list looks like. And you can see, hey, yeah, that looks pretty good. There's an example of basic usage here. And you can see that there's an ion list tag. So there's my ion list. That's going to be kind of like the table. And then inside of it is kind of interesting. You can do one or two things. You can either make a button, which has the attribute ion item. And if you do that, it'll have like a chevron over here. And you can see this later down in their examples, you can use an ion item if you wanted to have it look a little different. I think a button is perfect for us because ours is going to drill down. So I'm actually going to steal this top example here, this one that's called basic, and I'm going to paste it in just because it makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm just going to paste it in right here. So I've got a list, and then this list is going to have individual rows on it. These rows are actually button items, which is kind of weird, but it's also kind of not because you can click them and it drills down. So they're buttons, and it's got ion items on it. And it's already kind of set up with an ng4, which is kind of neat. So we want a movie quote of the movie quotes stream. I get myself in so much trouble with my plurals and not plurals. That's of course a stream, so we want to do an async of that because we want the actual arrays. And then it's got a click listener on. I'm not going to mess with that just yet. I'm just going to do one thing at a time here. And then I want to display something inside of it. So let's just go ahead and display an h2 for the movie quote.quote. And then we'll use a p tag for the movie quote.movie. Cool. And in theory, that should do it, right? The biggest thing I do wrong is I spell movie quote stream wrong or something like that. But let's just go ahead and see kind of what we got here. So find our app here, and you can see it says, hey, everything is awesome. So that is great. I'm sure there's tons of things that we could change about it. Let's make a minor CSS change and then call it good for now. The minor CSS change I want to make is I personally feel like it's indented a little bit too far over. So I just wanted to make a minor change just to kind of show some CSS. But if we wanted to indent it a little bit less, we could say, hey, buttons that are Ion items. That's a very, very verbose description. Let's just go ahead and change your padding left to be something a little bit smaller. Let's just make it like 4 pixels. So there, if you watch it close, you can see that it's just a little bit tighter. Cool, let's go ahead and review our diff and call it a day. So we've got the movie quote interface, which is we made from scratch. We've got the list HTML, which just used their Ion list, and you can see like you get for free the right look for iOS and for Android, and I just think that's cool, right? So it just kind of looks like the right thing for the 2 platforms, which is just still a little fun. Added a little bit of CSS just to kind of remember how that works. So it's a little bit different on Ionic. It goes into this this tag that they've made, and that works out fine, right? So you just put all your CSS inside of there, and they're able to do some optimizations. And then this is where we made a quick stream. So this is Firebase Read. Great, and if you've got a lot of data, you'll probably have a lot of things showing up there, and that would be great. All right, we are all set for now. We'll see you next time. Maybe we'll create some movie quotes. See you then. Bye.